My name is Chris Klein, and I'm here today with the Sailor Station, where we're interviewing Senator Kaminsky. Senator, thanks for coming in today.
Sure.
My first question is, what made you interested in politics, and how did you get involved in politics? And at what age did you decide to become a politician?
I probably decided in kindergarten, but it was kind of like a long, twisted road to get there. But what really kind of reinvigorated my desire to get involved in politics was I was a lawyer in public service. I was a prosecutor for the federal government. I worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But right as I was in the middle of that career, Hurricane Sandy hit Long Beach, where I had grown up. And I really got involved again in the community, helping people get back up on their feet. And that got me really thinking about how to help people beyond just doing it in the courtroom like I had done as a prosecutor, which was a job I really loved. And so I started talking with Harvey Wiesenberg, who was the assemblyman for the area, and he and I talked about he was turning 80 and whether he was going to retire or not, and he thought I would be a good replacement for him. So we kind of talked about that, and I started thinking about all the good ways that you could help people in the job. People need help with housing, people need help with education, people need help getting jobs, people need help in all different facets. Our environment certainly needs help. So I thought it would be a good way to go get involved in those areas. So, I've only been in politics for 3 years, but it's been a challenge so far, but I've really liked it.
Quite a rise in 3 years, sir. You've written legislation to decouple student state test scores from teacher evaluations. Why did you feel that this was important?
Well, I talk to teachers and students a lot. I try to go to schools throughout my district all the time and talk to students and teachers, and they were really dissatisfied with the testing regime that the state had placed upon them. Teachers felt that they didn't really own their classrooms anymore, that they weren't able to teach up to their potential because they were always teaching to a test. They didn't feel that the evaluations were fair, and the parents I talked to and students really felt that the joy of going to school was really sucked out of the day, and that everything was about test prep, and that it really didn't measure a student's aptitude. So I said, look, if we're gonna have, if we want to have our best teachers, which we obviously do, and we've got great ones down here, especially in Oceanside. We want to give them the latitude they need to do the job as they see fit, and there are certainly ways of evaluating teachers that aren't always based on one test. So I thought that would be a good way to keep our educational system moving forward instead of backward, and I think that has caught on.
Absolutely, and we all know how important education is to this country. As a senator, you've authored many pieces of legislation, but what would you feel, besides student test scores being decoupled from teacher evaluations, is one of the most important pieces that you've authored, co-authored, or sponsored in the Senate?
There's a lot of different important legislation out there. I put in a bill very recently that would make the state set a standard for how much of a certain cancer-causing chemical called 1,4-dioxane can be in our water. We recently discovered that in a lot of water sources on Long Island, this chemical is present and kind of present in very heavy levels, or levels that should cause concern. So I was the first one to put in a bill saying, hey, New York State, let's come up with a standard of how much there could be in the water. The different water authorities throughout Long Island have no idea how much should be in their water. And it looks like the state is going to be, the governor kind of took the initiative himself and is having his state Department of Health over the next few months come up with a certain level. So I was kind of there from the beginning. I thought that was important. Helping Sandy victims was obviously very important to me, representing the South Shore. Many people in Oceanside suffered through that. So I had a bill that would require the state assistance program called New York Rising to have to detail how many cases they still have left every 3 months. So this way they're getting money out to people that need it quicker, and they're held accountable for doing that. And of course, I used to be a corruption prosecutor, so a lot of ethics reform matters to me. I think our politicians should be held to the highest standard possible, and I would have legislation that would make it easier for assistant district attorneys to go after corruption that's out there by giving them more tools to do so. There's a lot of different areas I try to be involved in, but certainly protecting our environment, certainly helping storm victims recover, and certainly ethics reform are at the top of the list.
Now, when you say that corruption was a big matter for you, how do you feel that the corruption scandals that have rocked, such as the former Assembly Speaker for the New York State, Mr. Silva, has affected your opinion on corruption and battling it in New York State?
Well, my opinion of corruption hasn't really changed. Unlike most people who come up to Albany, I was a corruption prosecutor, so I kind of knew what it was like. I knew how bad it would be, and there is a big corruption problem in Albany. A lot of other elected officials tend to tend to downplay it or say that prosecutors have gotten too aggressive or that it's all blown up in the press. You'd be surprised how many people in Albany live in this bubble where they don't think they have a problem. Look, when you have the Speaker of one house and the Senate Majority Leader in another house, one from one party, one from another party, both on their way to jail, which is the state we're currently in, we've got a major problem. And so I have no illusions about how corrupt Albany is, how much we need to do to gain the people's trust, and that's not just going to happen on its own. It's going to happen if we take measures that are going to reassure them of that, and that's why I'm always pushing for those. Unfortunately, it's been a very uphill fight. Very few people want to move things there, and I think until the public really demands it and keeps electing people that care about ethics reform, we're going to have a problem.
Now, when you say this is an uphill fight, so as with the Senate, who is fighting back against this? Would this be the upper echelons of the Senate? Would it be the people supporting the senators? Yeah,
so the people that run the Senate have not advanced lots of important ethics legislation. I'll give you an example. Right now, if you're a senator, you're allowed to have 2 jobs. And I think that creates a conflict of interest. What do I mean by conflict of interest? When you wake up in the morning, who are you fighting for? Are you fighting for the people you represent or the clients you represent at your law firm? And when a client hires you, are they hiring you because you're the best lawyer or because they may want something from the Senate one day, and by giving you money in your side job, they kind of know that they'll listen to you in your other capacity? I am a big supporter of a bill that would say Senate should be a full-time job, treat it like a full-time job, and all that comes with that. And it has gone nowhere because the people in the Senate who have in this old boys network still like getting paid at their law firm and still don't think there's a problem. So that's one good example of why it's an uphill fight.
Absolutely, sir. And finally, well, second finally, where do you feel that you'd like to take your political career in the future?
Well, you know, I've been in the Senate now about almost 14 months. I feel like I'm learning all the time. So what I really need to do right now is prove to the people I represent that I'm going to work as hard as I can for them and fight for their interests. Something I'm working on right now with the Long Island Railroad, which has had really terrible delays, and you know, I'm trying to be a leader there to make sure that we have the right system in place that's going to not allow these breakdowns to happen in the future. So I'm trying to show people all the time that I'm going to work hard for them. And then the rest is kind of up to fate. You know, who leaves a position, who retires, who gets forced out, who creates an opening. You got to take those as they come. In the meantime, as my boss in the U.S. Attorney's Office used to say, you got to chop the wood that's in front of you and not worry about the rest of the forest.
As an extension off of the Long Island Railroad issue, is there anything that you feel that New York State could do to help this issue and perhaps cause there to be less issues with breakdowns and such? Yeah,
definitely. So there's a short-term and a long-term component to that. Short-term, I definitely think that we need to come up with some alternatives this summer that are going to stop, you know, they're going to allow people a pressure valve release when the trains are going to be canceled. So can we come up with ferries from our area? Can we have different coach buses take people into work? Can we reroute trains? We need to be creative with how we do that. But long term, I've called for Amtrak to get out of the business of running Penn Station. They clearly don't care about it the way that somebody who's looking out for Long Islanders would. They haven't invested the right amount. They haven't sounded the alarm. They're not even good at doing the repairs they need to do. So I've called for whether it be a state takeover or a public-private partnership to look at taking over Penn Station, and I think that's the way we have to go.
Absolutely. And finally, now, besides being a senator, you're also a father and a husband. How did they support you, your family, in your political career, and how did they feel and react when you first approached them about becoming a state senator and running for office?
Well, my son was 1 at the time, so he didn't really have an opinion on it. But he looked very cute and helped me in campaign ads. But my wife has been totally supportive. She, you know, we don't really make a tremendous amount of money in the job. So my wife definitely helps there. She's very supportive in a lot of other ways. I couldn't do it without her. So it's definitely a team effort. And if my wife didn't want me to do this, I would definitely not be doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator, for coming in today. It was a pleasure.
Go Sailors.